Greetings, everybody. Welcome. Today we're going to do something a little different. I'm going to talk about a treatise actually I penned, not a classic one, not yet at least, not a classic. I haven't memorized it, so I'll go ahead and read it even though it's my own work. Deflect-Strike as one. When receiving a cut, if the moment of deflecting and catching, the line is a space not even a hair could enter, then your Duifang sword will become your sword. If one hesitates at the moment of deflection, then your sword will become your Duifang's. Thus, receiving and releasing as one, without thought, the sword knows its target without looking. Defending and then countering is as a blind man swinging a stick. So I tried to keep it simple and terse. Most Taiji classics, whether you're in the sort of the Taiji trend classics, the literary tradition, or other sword classics, tend to be rather short and just trying to encapsulate an idea, and that's what I tried to do there. Then, of course, the commentary on those can be quite long. So let's talk about what do I mean there? What's the idea we want to get from this, and how does it relate to our sword work? So the first thing, of course, is what is catching? In the Mandarin, this would be jiejing. And jie just means catch, literally catch. Someone throws you a ball, boom, you catch it. It's jie. So it's not a specialized or fancy sort of martial arts term. It's just a regular term you use in spoken Chinese. Catching here means to deflect to exactly the point where my Duifang has been led into emptiness and no further. So not to go past that, and of course, not less than that. And at that moment, when I have caught my Duifang, this jiejin, right there, I've also taken aim. So we achieve this idea of, or principle of, receiving is releasing, and that while I'm deflecting, I'm also taking aim for my counter blow. And this is really important. This is essential. And I think it's something that makes Chinese swordsmanship different, or something that we're striving to achieve in our swordsmanship. So if we take a look at what do we mean by that? So it doesn't matter. We'll use thrusts to start because it's relatively easy to see, but we could use this principle, this way of deflecting, this catching jin, regardless of which side we're deflecting to or what cut the Duifang's delivering. So if he comes to deflect, boom, right here, this is my jiejin. Now, you can see this is let off. If I step forward, you can see he's just offline. Of course, I'm deflecting with the flat of my blade at the base here when my sword is stronger, but also if I sight right down, look right down, I'm right on line with his nose. So at the moment that I'm deflecting, we did that again, just at this moment of deflection, I'm turning my waist, I lead the Duifang off into nothing. This space should be no longer than the breadth of a hair, and my tip is right on line with his nose here, right on line with the center, ready to countercut. I want to just take a quick look at it on a different angle here. So as he's coming at me, I'm going to turn and deflect just to here. Of course, I don't want to go too far, and I don't want to obviously not go enough, because then he would still hit me. And I really need to pay attention that as I deflect, I'm taking aim. So I'm not letting my tip wander over this way, right? So if we deflect in this manner, what we're doing is creating a single form, a single shape, a dancing. It's quite different than the idea of sort of deflecting, or I should say, parrying and countercutting. If we parry and countercut, then we have really this idea of a sort of attack and defense. The idea of this here we're looking to achieve is a single form or single shape. In Chinese is called danxing, or single, literally dan, single xing form. So if we come here and see what we're looking is not to have this sort of dualism of pushing to the side, parrying. See, now my tip is over there. It's kind of pointing out the window. And then I kind of swing back. This is where I would say it's like a blind man swinging a stick. We see this often in swordplay, regardless of whether someone's coming from a Chinese tradition, a European tradition, doesn't matter. We get this idea of like, okay, I want to keep this away from me, and then I just swing back. There's no aim. The mind intent, I'd say, is actually quite small. Here, when I go to deflect, as I deflect here, you can see, I hope, that as I turned my waist, I'm right on line with his nose. I'm right on the center. It doesn't matter. Here, of course, a thrust comes back. You can see very clearly what's going on. But I could come back underneath this way, right? I could come with a P cut, it doesn't matter. If we take a look, let's take a look at it from another angle here, if you would. If I turn my waist here, I could also be deflecting this way. It doesn't matter that my tip is forward. Of course, it's easiest to kind of get the idea, the feel for this. If I go turn my waist just to here, thinking of coming back with a thrust, where my tip is, it's easiest enough to see this way where my cut's going to come back. And you can see how I'm moving. If you talk about it in the sort of classic taiji terms, I have my circle to the square. Circle square is one movement. And as I'm doing this, of course, my mind intent is large. Rather than having my mind intent be, I need to defend myself and then, swing back with the cutter. After having deflected, think about, where's my duifang? And my tip tending to wander out. As I'm deflecting, I'm creating that counter grip. So structurally, functionally, what does this mean? That deflecting is aiming. And what that means, let's take a look on the other side. It doesn't matter what cut I'm going to counter with. This also means is that as I deflect, part of my mind intent, perhaps most of my mind intent, is here, listening, moving with my duifang, sticking and falling, always moving with my duifang. So as I come in there, I'm deflecting, but another part of my mind intent is to my duifang, sticking actively, finding that place, feeling where I should countercut. In fact, you could say in a sense, my duifang is telling me where to countercut. Now, so we go back to this idea, if as I'm deflecting here, I go just to this point, let's turn around and take a look at it from this angle again. If as I deflect, I come just to here, just to this point, this exact precise point, this jiejing point right there, and this is no longer than a breadth of a hair, we can say that Fei Hong's sword has become my sword. Because as he did that, let's go there, as he thrust at me, boom, here, at this moment, I've led him into emptiness, so he has nothing. My sword is between us, right? It's acting as a shield, and that has opened me up for the countercut. So as I deflected and took aim, it became one. So if I only go to that point, go right to my jiejing point, boom, right down, maybe I even cut down to the leg here, my duifang sword becomes my sword. If on the other hand, let's take a look at this angle, if my movement is larger than that, it's not just the breadth of a hair, right? Breadth of a hair is, it's hard to even see how thick that is, right? So we're talking about essentially having no width. If it's larger than the breadth of a hair, my sword will become my duifang sword. So in this case, if he comes at me and I go there and I start doing this, what happens is, well, he feels that I'm going there because my mentor is like, it's very easy for him to come right around, say with a P cut to my arm, no problem. So if my jiejing is not a point, but is an area, and he comes at me and I go here, all of that gives him, my sword now has become his sword because my action has opened up the door for him, right? Has given him a second possibility to come in on. So I want to make sure, so if I go too far up, right? So obviously if I go way too far, but even if I go a little bit too far, as soon as he feels this sliding on his blade, he can follow right in. So I am, if it's longer than a breadth of a hair, my sword has become my duifang sword. So what we want, we'll just take a look right here real quick. What we want here is that as he comes at me, right there, it's just the point. And this is why Jianfa is very much in the wrist, because I have to rotate around that point, around that jiejing point and come right back. Say I want to come back with a P cut. Could be the same thing if I wanted to come here and come underneath with a liao. It's the same thing. I am rotating right around. So turn the waist, boom. It's almost as if you created an axle hill, drilled through my sword, through his board, and created a little pivot point here. And right from there, I'm coming back in, right from there back in. So it's just the breadth of a hair. In that case, his sword becomes my sword. If we come, let's go on here, the same direction. If I have a pause, I'm creating a space. I'm creating the same kind of situation, same problem for myself when my sword becomes his sword. And that's usually because I'm thinking dualistically. And that's what we're looking to grow past in our swordsmanship, to not be dualistic, but to achieve this receiving is releasing, this danxing single form. So here, if I go 1, 2, with a pause, I'm creating a space. That's the same situation. That's the kind of dualistic thinking, attack or defend and attack, that then will also make my sword my Duifang sword, because he can just maybe give me a P cut, and as he does, I go there, and even though I'm lined up, because I pause, what's he going to do? Boom, hit me with another P cut, or maybe come around underneath for a thrust. So whenever we're facing a Duifang, we have to be smooth and continuous and work to escape or get beyond, or maybe say not stay in that dualistic kind of sense. So we think of this in terms of sort of the geometry of it. Here, if maybe I have my sword to the side, maybe I'm opening up to give the Duifang a chance to enter in here. And as he comes in, I'm going to turn and deflect till just that point, just that judging point where my Duifang is led off into nothing. But as you can see, my blade is at the same time lined right up with the center. And it doesn't matter. Of course, I could be deflecting this side as well. As I turn my waist and leave my Duifang out, I come right back in with my thrust. It can be to here. Doesn't have to be the tip directly forward, but the blade is on line for that countercut. It can be here, can sweep up underneath. If we look at the kind of, again, the geometry of it with my partner, with my Duifang here, if you think of what we're doing is moving from the circle to the square, so just thinking of mechanically, if I'm rolling and turning this way, where is that judging point? If you put your tip of the sword right on my hands there, yes. Now, if he pushed in straight, I'm going to roll till exactly there. See here, I've turned the circle just at this tangent point, and I'm straight line right back into him. So I'm going to go from my circle to the square, or in modern English we probably say circular linear, but circular linear, deflect strike, not deflect and then strike. Let's take a look at it from the angle here. Let's turn it the other direction. So again, so you can turn easy side, doesn't matter. If he's pushing here and that's pushing in, I'm turning and moving it with it to there, and see this there, it would slide off into emptiness, but my hand is right there. So mind intent wise, what we need is, I'm moving with him. You might even feel that most of your mind intent is here in the receiving aspect, but let's go back again one more time, please. As we turn and move to here, part of my mind is also going forward, taking aim. So deflecting is aiming. So for receiving is to achieve, receiving is releasing. That means deflecting is taking aim, right? So they're the same thing. It's not receive and then release. It is receiving is releasing, okay? So if we can achieve this, then what we're doing is we're moving in a fashion that is non-dualistic, and we escape being a prisoner of a sort of either or one and the other kind of thinking, that kind of mind intent. All right, so one last thing I want to throw in here, and that is that I cheated a little bit, you could say. It's a little plagiarism here in this little treatise that I penned. And this was actually done on purpose. I tried to keep the flavor of the old classics that are really terse and direct. It's a little easier in some ways to do that in classical Chinese, but I tried to really work to have that in this little treatise. But also what I did was steal a line from a past classic. And this was often done in the past. One thing, of course, if there's a good idea, why not reuse it? I'm sure they were doing that in the past. They didn't probably look at plagiarism the way we would look at it today. Also, when you can quote classics from previous authors, from earliest authors, what you're doing is showing that you are an erudite scholar who knows those classics and is familiar with them. So I tried to keep that kind of flavor as well. And I wanted to give you this phrase, a space not even a hair could enter. Where does that come from? So that phrase has been translated a number of ways. The other way is you cannot even introduce the breadth of a hair. And it was apparently coined by the Zen monk Takuan Soho, very famous Japanese monk, in an essay, The Mysterious Record of Abiding in Ignorance. And he wrote that actually in the form of a letter to Munenori, Yagyu Munenori, a sword instructor to the shogun's family. So in a very famous school of Japanese swordsmanship. So I very purposely took that. Maybe some people have heard that line before and said, oh, I picked up on that. I purposely plagiarized that. When I read it years ago, I thought, oh, that's a really great way of describing this idea, this point of the judging. That's just a breadth of hair. So I stole it. Okay, are there any questions or observations?
Yeah, I have one. You hear?
Please, yes.
Well, first of all, your chair is partially being blocking the camera.
Yeah.
My question is, how far in would you typically let the blade come? I'm noticing you can either deflect high up the blade or let it come in very deep and deflect lower.
So the question is how close will let my blade so let me clarify your question. So the question is, how close will I let the blade come to my body, or where do I want to deflect on the Duifang's blade?
No, how close do you let it come to you?
How close? So the question is, how close do I let the Duifang's blade come to me? I would say this is something we need to develop. I want to get it closer and closer, but not so close that I get tangled up. Here, what I like to do is, often I'll think about it. One thing you would think about is I'm moving with my Duifang, right? I'm not just responding nervously to my Duifang. And so what I like to do sometimes is I'll even put a ball there and say, to students, imagine there is this rubber ball here on the tip of your Duifang sword, and you're going to move with that. So sticking and following, especially those practicing Taiji Chuan, get stuck in an idea of sticking and following, be like when we're doing push hands, if we're here, that we have to be like this and that we're physically sticking and following. This is a great way to learn about sticking and following, to practice it, but it's a beginner's way. And you can practice it the whole of your training, the whole of your practice. I still practice it decades later, but it is an entry-level way of understanding sticking and following. And so sometimes people get this idea that you must be physically joined to stick and follow. If you think about that, you can't really do it, because if that was a live blade coming at me and say it's thrusting toward my throat, I don't want to wait for it to actually touch, this sharp blade to touch my throat, or even this dull wooden blade if it's coming with speed and power, and then turn and move with it. I have to be able to stick and follow across space. And that if you're not doing that, I would say, sorry, no matter how long you've been practicing, you're still a beginner, because you're practicing as a beginner. If you go to university and you repeat the first 2 years of undergraduate program again and again and again and again for 20 years, it's not the same as progressing and getting your PhD and going on and doing further studies. So we have to go beyond this entry-level kind of practice into things like sanshou and swordplay. Having said that, a lot of times, I think when people are starting off, they have almost a beach ball size ball attached on the front of the Duifang sword. So as that's coming in, imagine there's a ball there. As he's pushing that, and I'm moving with that ball as if there is a solid connection. So I'm moving as if he's touching me, but I'm not letting him touch me. So that may first be very large. Later on, I want to continually shrink that ball down and maybe get down. We've got some practice in, so about 6 inches good, maybe like that. And so as he's coming in, I let it get that close to my body and go in there. Later on, I'd like to get down to, say, a fist width, about 3 inches, so that I let that sword get this close to me. And it'll, of course, depend on the moment. It won't always be this close. Depends on the cut, the angle, how we're both moving. But generally, I want to get down to here, and it gets there. I don't want to get smaller than that 3 inches, because sometimes you simply just get cut. If you're getting so close, sometimes you just get tangled up, and you have to leave room for a margin of error. You have to leave room for, if it's so close to just say 2 fingers, and I try to deflect there, I might not quite have the time to get him completely out of alignment before he can say come in and reach and get my elbow there, right? Because I've just let him get a little too deep, advance in a way that's kind of crushing me down, like not giving me room to move. So the width of a fist is, width of a fist is the closest I want to get. Sometimes it's going to be a little longer depending on the situation. Timing-wise, what that means here is that, see, if I go too early, if I go out here, he has plenty of time to change. In order to be able to catch him, I have to let him in. There's a saying you hear in Taiji Chuan sometimes, let the thief in the house. And I've repeated this more times than I can ever begin to estimate. If I let him in, then he's extending and it's easy for me to catch him. If I don't let him in, stop him early, two things. One is his arm's not very extended. So even if he doesn't change, if I deflect him there, his arm's way back there, it's easy for him to pull it away. As opposed to if I get him to extend, the more, the more he extends, the closer his arm is to me, so easier just to countercut. If he's coming, then the second thing, of course, is that if I deflect him early, that's giving him the opportunity to change. And also, I'm extended my arm out there, it makes it easy for him to hit. If I let him come in, the further he's committed, the more difficult it is for him to change, and I could come in. So start with, whatever you're comfortable with. You may have a beach ball on the front of your training partner's sword, feel like that you're moving, and then you realize that, and you realize, oh, I am deflecting way too early. I'm not letting the thief in the house at all. I'm shooting at him while he's on my neighbor's property. I want to shrink that down. It may come down to basketball size, and you get good at that, and then, okay, let me go down to, say, a grapefruit, 6-inch size. I guess that's about a handball size, and then eventually just a fist. But again, remember, depending on the angle, it might not always be just a fist, but in training, when you're drilling with your partner, if you can get it down to just that kind of distance, okay, when you need an extra inch or two forward, you'll probably be fine. Whereas if you're always too big and then you need to make it smaller, in sword play, that's going to be more difficult. Okay, does that clarify that for you?
Yep, thank you.
You're welcome. There's a good detail, to get into these little nitty-gritty kind of things, because theory is nice, but we have to make it function. Any other questions?
No, I have one.
Please.
I know the dancing idea that this is basically a single shape, a single movement.
Yes.
And I don't do European HEMA or anything like that, but like there's concepts of timing where it's like single timing. Is that a concept that is relevant here at all, or would you say that it's different, like it's like timing and a half, or how would you, like, is it at the same time, or in the time it takes to do one action, or is it something else?
So the question is, make sure everybody heard the question. I haven't been trained in HEMA, so I may make comments that are incorrect at times. If I do, somebody please correct me and inform me, because just as I can't know everything, and I have friends who practice European martial arts, hear about it now and then, but I'm not an expert in them, and I may misuse terms or mischaracterize something in HEMA, and if I do, somebody should let me know. So I can't talk about specifics of timing and things. What I would say, though, is my impression, my understanding, and this is not just within swordsmanship. We're talking about really, I think, the way people tend to perceive the world in general is that we do, and we're trained to think in very dualistic kind of terms, right? From the time we're children, we learn verbs, positive and negative, and our language talks about things in positive and negatives. And that is the way we organize things in our mind. And so we tend to move, whether or not we're moving quickly. I've certainly seen people who practice, fencers, for example, who are very quick, and they parry riposte very quickly, and I could not see a seam. But their intent, the way they're looking at your Duifeng, the way they're interacting, we would call Duifeng, they would call something else, the way they're doing that is a dualistic kind of mind intent. And it feels very different, just from my own experience. What we're doing is it's a single action that flows, and it has no feeling or feeling of a seam at all. So it's hard to put this into words, but I can say from my experience, I can really feel and sense a difference. I know in the past, I was definitely dualistic. I can see it in the way I used to practice push hands, the way my sancho was, the way my sword play was. At some point, that changed. I had an epiphany and I realized it's not deflect and then strike, it's deflect-strike. And when that epiphany occurred is when my teacher Wang Yin was teaching once about push hands and showing applications. Bang, it came to me. It's deflect-strike. And there was this shift in perception. And I felt then after that my mind intent was literally much larger. And that's the kind of thing that, I can just tell you what it feels like, give the description. But if we're thinking this way from the beginning, I hopefully can help you to go that direction and push that direction. I think that many people who are still in a dualistic mode think that they are achieving a single shape. And I would say is what they are, smooth and fast, because there's a difference in that mind intent. And that's my experience. Somebody may disagree with that. It's hard to compare because what I'm feeling when I'm doing it versus what somebody else is feeling when they're doing it, how can we compare those things? But I know that when I've gotten into real bouts with people, bouts when it's, another teacher and myself privately, that when I'm compared to, say, when I'm teaching and just interacting with a student, that is very much what I would call the checkbook mind. I'm watching the student, I'm deflecting and counting, and I'm moving smoothly, but it's almost formulaic, you could say, because I'm kind of instructing. The way I'm playing that student is to help them improve their sword play. When I've played somebody who is of real skill and they're really trying to get me and I'm absolutely trying to counter hit and hit them, we're both using, good solid weapons and going at each other, you change into a different mind intent. And you literally feel, it sounds strange to you, but I literally can feel what my Duifang is going to do, like as a tactile sense, because my mind intent has changed this way. And I feel where they're going to cut as they're beginning to cut. And I feel my mind go into them. So my mind is both receiving and going in at the same time. And I think this is something that's quite different from a dualistic kind of mind. And I can't do it all the time. I can do it in sword play. But, the rest of the world, everyday life, my mind is like other people's. I have what I call that checkbook mind. Does that make sense or maybe not? I don't know.
It does. It absolutely does.
Okay, thank you. I hope it's so. I'm glad to hear it makes some sense.
It's just hard to put into words, but no, I've connected that to something else that I was already thinking of, and yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Right, yes. It is very difficult to put this in words. You might say it's not possible to put this into words because it's a feeling. Sometimes, as I said, when it finally happened for me, it wasn't like I was even reaching for that. I was trying to understand it. It just, bang, it happened like that, and it was a genuine epiphany. It wasn't a slow, sort of figured it out. It was, bang, change in perception. And sometimes, talking about push hands earlier, I think I can get that across to students, give them the feeling of it sometimes much more easily or clearly in push hands because we are physically attached and it makes it much easier to sense and have that sticking and falling when you're physically attached as opposed to doing that across space. But I think that is very interesting and stimulating when you do start to go, well, wait a minute. I don't just stick and follow when I'm touching the Duifang. I stick and follow when the guy's over there. My Duifang is several meters away and I'm still moving with him. That's quite interesting and enjoyable. Any other questions? Okay, well, I hope this stimulates your practice, helps you to level up and maybe have an epiphany yourself. If you have other questions later on, please let me know as it percolates and you think about it. Until next time, thank you, Fei Hong. Thanks, everybody. Stay strong. 再见.